So today we are going to talk about my favorite topic, things I wish I knew before starting a business partnership. This is for anyone that's thinking about jumping into a partnership with maybe their mom, their friend, their family member, or even a stranger that you met online, hopefully not through a dating app. These are kind of all the things that I wish I knew before jumping in. And not gonna lie, jumping into a partnership kind of feels like jumping into bed together with someone, obviously without the intimacy. I hope you're not sleeping with your business partner, by the way. But if you're like me, no one really teaches you these things. Like after quitting my career in pharmacy, I got burned multiple times, as you'll hear throughout this story. And I want to share the hard lessons I learned. So my goal of this video is really just to save you a lot of headache and heartache, just like how my ABG ex did to me when she broke up with me. So let's get started. These are the 10 things I wish I knew before I started my first business partnership. Things are rarely 50-50. So I think one of the first businesses I started up back in the day was like a protein company, and I went 50-50 with my brother. And then later when I actually grew up, because this was like in college, right? I started to do blogging and all that, and I partnered up with my friend Joe. And when I first started out my my first real business, I thought, hey, let's do everything equally. Let's split 50-50 because that seems like fair and equal, right? Like on the surface, 50-50 makes a lot of sense because I'm bringing in 50% of the effort and you are bringing 50% of the effort too. What I quickly realized through that partnership, this was back in like 2014. It was Joe from JK News.
That motherfucker be saying I be acting too black. Shit, what am I supposed to do, huh?
We wanted to try and create like info products at the time. That's why we created this blog, Refugee Hustle, which I still use that domain to this day. As we started working on it and started making blog posts and content, I realized even though I put in quite a bit of work, the truth was Joe's contribution was way more valuable than my contribution. I was a beginner and he was obviously a more advanced YouTuber and had more creative like flex. Like my writing felt very robotic. It didn't feel normal, right? What I kind of quickly learned from this lesson is that 50-50 doesn't always account for the actual value that a person brings to the project. So yes, I did most of the admin, right? Like I did most of the tech. I did most of the creative content too, like setting up the website. If you go on Wayback Machine, like dude, I built the jankiest ass website that I'm not so proud of. I did all that and it was a lot of work in setting up the email list, especially as someone who didn't know how to do that. But then Joe just knew like what made people tick, what people kind of watch, that entertaining aspect too, that I am not that great at. And also at the time too, like he had a really, like YouTube wasn't like how it was now. He wasn't really shadow banned or anything like that. Like he had a way bigger audience and could pull people into our ecosystem. Like I remember when I first started my YouTube channel, like this YouTube channel, I talked about pharmacy and Joe promoted it. And then like I had 3,000 subscribers immediately, which was really crazy. Maybe not 3,000, but at least a good G. Like a lot of random people who didn't know me. If you're here and you're OG, like comment below. It was like he could just pull way more people onto that email list and ecosystem. And he was also way better of a storyteller than me too. I think what happened, we started doing this like course together by Remy Sethi, learning how to create digital offers and all that sort of stuff. But it was just moving like really slow because I was a complete new beginner. Joe actually started losing a lot of interest because we weren't getting that much momentum. And I think momentum is so key. Like if you can get quick momentum and celebrate those wins, that is ideal because it kind of shows you proof of concept that something is actually worth it, like in quotes, that something is kind of working. One of the lessons I learned was like my ignorance tax, like what Hormozy talks about, was just so high in the beginning. I didn't really know or have anything to add to the table. It's like nowadays, yeah, I kind of know how content works. I kind of know how to tell a story. I kind of know how to blog. I know how to do affiliate marketing. I know sales. I know like a lot of bit of everything almost. But if I were to be very real to myself, my ego really hated it. But the value I brought did not warrant 50-50 partnership because things weren't that equal. This is the lesson I kind of learned through that experience where most people like to start at 50-50 because it seems equal, but it's the wrong approach. Because I think one of the mistakes I kind of made, because my ego was like so fragile, I associated it with my worth, like my worth as a human. I think we think about that way too much. We identify with our business. Everything feels very personal. And so if things feel kind of like very personal, if we're like kind of equal as humans, then why wouldn't we do 50-50? But I think oftentimes this is actually kind of the wrong approach, because Partnerships, when you do a partnership with someone, it doesn't assess our worth as a human, but we should really look at it through the lens of like contributions that we bring to the project, right? If you are doing a partnership, like one of the things that I like to do these days is just like really assess the contribution we're bringing to the table. So instead of assuming everything should be 50-50, I like to use frameworks. So there's this guy somewhere in this room, I have his book, but he has like $1 million consulting, which is kind of sounds really scammy, but he has this great framework for partnerships that divides contributions more fairly, in my opinion. And I find that this is actually pretty true. So 50% should go to acquisition, 30% should go for methodology or system, and then 20% goes for fulfillment. So acquisition is kind of like your sales and marketing type of stuff, bringing people into the ecosystem, and also like making sure you're selling the work if you're doing consulting. Methodology is like, okay, it's like, what are we going to use the systems and SOPs to kind of drive the mission that we have for like the systems, right? 20% is fulfillment. So I think about like, okay, once we have these clients and customers, how do we actually do the work? Based on my experience, I think this is definitely true, especially the acquisition part. I think beginners tend to put more value on the fulfillment aspect, which is really important because you don't want to be a scammer, bro. Oh my God. If you're like kind of assess like what's more important, the fulfillment doesn't matter if the work is not sold. So that's why more experienced people will always value the sales and marketing more versus the fulfillment. And I didn't understand that as a younger person. Personally, like if you're new, I probably wouldn't change too much of these numbers, and I would really use that as a starting point. But that's the first lesson I learned. Number 2, there's no point in talking numbers if there's no money coming in. So one of the biggest mistakes I made back in the day was wasting time negotiating like percentages before there was any revenue coming in, like any money or anything coming into the business. This brings me back maybe 2-3 years ago, but back in the day, I was actually hit up for high ticket sales, like contract, for my friend who did email marketing. It was actually a really, really good friend who referred me over a good friend of his too. And so he really needed help. I could tell that he was really terrified of sales. And at the time, I was actually also relatively new. Like I had some high ticket sales experience, but I wouldn't say I'm as good as I am right now. And also like, this is my first time doing more of a head of sales or consulting role versus like actually on the floor. And so what I did was I actually would hire like closers and stuff, and then take a percentage of it, set up all the systems and all that too, and just play sales manager and stuff like that. So, but anyways, back to the story. When we first started, we were like going like back and forth on percentages. He wanted to cap everything at like 20%, and I really wanted 25%. And that's what a lot of people don't know. A lot of these like agencies and stuff, like one agency my friend actually started working with, they charged $25,000 and 25% on top of that, which is pretty crazy. They'll review the offer, they'll go through the customer journey, everything bottom funnel like related, they take care of, which is pretty cool. And they instill their own sales team. They actually take the sales team, fire all of them, which is crazy. I would never do that, but that's kind of their offers. But since I was new, I was just like, okay, well, you know, I'll take the 20% just to get the experience. I didn't tell him that, but I wanted to do that. And at the time, I was on a very lucrative offer. Like we're doing $500K per week on this like crazy offer back in the day. But I remember we must have gone back and forth like on the numbers too. And so we landed on 20%. I paid my closers, my like fulfillment, like 15% because I wanted to retain like really good people, and I would take 5%. Honestly, I should have probably taken a little bit more than that. But yeah, that was kind of the agreement that I had. I remember after going through all this, it was a lot of work just going back and forth. But after 3 to 6 months of work, I only made about like $1,200, maybe $1,000. And so I decided to leave. And if you break that down, oh my God, that's less than a few hundred per month. Like it was so bad, and there wasn't enough business to deserve my energy. On top of that, this client, by the way, he would hit me up at 2 a.m. He would blast my phone. It was a client from hell, and I was just like, this is just not worth it. And so looking back, I think I spent a little bit too much time like going back on numbers that didn't really matter because we were trying to negotiate over a few percentage points only to barely make anything from the deal. And even worse, like I think I stuck around a little bit too long of like, oh yeah, things will get better, like things will turn around. But because I didn't have that experience, I was paying my ignorance tax, and I was just staying there when really I could have looked for a better client, a better opportunity, something else that could better maximize my time rather than working with this client, who's really cool, by the way. Like, we're still friends, by the way. It's kind of funny, but yeah, after that experience, I just felt like I wasted a lot of time negotiating something that didn't really matter in the long run, right? And it was time spent on like something that wasn't truly fruitful, which in most cases is revenue to me. And so the lesson I kind of learned from the story was to really focus on making money first, focus on building this concept of proof of concept, where something is kind of deemed working and has momentum and has legs. You'll hear that a lot. And oftentimes, like, I see people always fighting over percentages, but a lot of time it doesn't even freaking matter. And I think a smarter way to do things, if I go back, negotiate a working agreement for proof of concept first, and then in the agreement have a checkpoint to talk about what a longer agreement looks like if you were to continue the work, especially if you're just working with someone, because you can do as much like scoping out something, but really the only way that you can really assess an offer or a deal or partnership is to work together too. And it's kind of like this concept of dating before marrying. And oh yeah, there was one more thing I forgot to talk about. A lot of people talk about equity and stuff. Equity only matters if you ever plan on selling the business. So if you don't plan ever on selling, if it's a personal brand, I hate to say it, but 100% of zero is still $0. Probably not worth it, you know? So yeah. By the way, how are you liking these like reflection videos? I would love to know. If you could just comment whether you f with these or not, just let me know. But these are things I actually legit think about all the time. So this next point is a little different. It's very similar, but a little different with a nuance. Don't get obsessed with maximizing percentages. If the previous point was like, there's no money coming in, there's no point of negotiating numbers. This is like sacrificing like percentage values, like 1% or 1.5%, right? And I think a lot of people tend, especially beginners, they get hung up on the percentages and they believe like, oh, these percentages are fixed. But something that we don't think about is like, we can actually grow the total amount that we can for a pie. There's this great book. Oh, here it is. I have it. It's called Slicing Pie. And it talks about how to like break apart things, partnerships, and all that too. I actually was supposed to read it a long time ago, but I didn't. I just really like the concept of slicing pie, honestly. So I haven't pulled this book since like 2019. It is crazy. So back in the day, I was a mother greedy and I wanted more percentages because I want to keep more of the pie, right? But what I realized is like, we can make the pie bigger, and even if we have a smaller percent, we can actually take more from that. There's some cases which I've kind of learned is to take less, especially if there's tangential benefits associated with it, right? Because money is one thing that you can look at, but there might be tangential benefits that you kind of want that you can't really put a dollar amount on. I'll give a good example. It's actually one of my recent clients, Ali Abdal. He and his team reached out to me for closing services. They wanted to scale their business. Their current closer wasn't like performing all the way, or he's transitioning off. And they reached out to me because I was a part of the program. I've met, like, was Ali's top affiliate at one point. He's my 2020 dream client when I first got into high ticket sales. I was like, ooh, Ali's going to do a high ticket program. Like, hopefully, like, I get to work with him one day. Well, like, I'm working with him now, and he's like one of my best clients, honestly. Like, it's been really, really sick. But as I was talking numbers with Angus, Ali's team was just offering me such a low number compared to what I normally take on as a client. And even my numbers for clients, they're pretty standard, honestly, right? And because of that, I almost walked away. And it's crazy because I just told you he was my dream client, but then I really took some time to reflect. And I think it's really, really important sometimes to just sit and just reflect sometimes, because like, it's so easy to just make a rush decision and be like, oh man, I regret that decision. So I never make decisions when I'm in a rush. I came to a conclusion to take it, and I started thinking about like, yo, what are the tangential benefits can I get through doing this, right? And I was thinking about, okay, Ali has a really great brand. That's something I always respect about it. It's like super trustworthy. The people that I meet in the program are super cool. Most of the people, I would say 95% of the people were all super dope, super kind. Some of my best friends came from PTYA too. I was like thinking, oh, if I do sales calls for him, I'm gonna meet more cool people and then potentially get a testimonial from Ali himself. If all those things lined up, then it's actually kind of worth it in my eyes, right? It might be actually worth it. So because I offer to take a little less of the pie, I actually negotiated for them to protect my downside too. Like, I have a base retainer if we have a slow month in leads or anything like that, that it's covered. There is a saying, as always, like, all profit is derived from risk. It's by Peter Drucker, one of my favorite quotes. And at the end of the day, by taking that deal, I didn't expect this, but I actually ended up making 10 times more with a smaller percentage than I would with a larger cut of a less established client, right? So TLDR, the lesson I kind of learned is taking a smaller piece of a larger pie is sometimes better than taking a bigger piece of something small. A good example is like 10% of 1 million is a lot more than 100% of $10, right? It's a lot more. I think something that we kind of forget sometimes, if you have a really killer team, if you have really, really good people around you, it's a collective of unfair advantages. And those advantages, that helps grow the pie. That helps make your offer more valuable. That helps take a lot of bandwidth off your plate so you can focus on your zone of genius. So one of my friends is actually a really good friend of this like famous marketer that you probably know. Very household name. The author of one of these books, hypothetically, loves wrestling and stuff. And I'll give you a hint, it rhymes with cuck funnels. This isn't super public, but from what I heard, like he actually treats his affiliates very, very well. And he has this abundance mindset when it comes to partnerships and all that. He basically pays all of his affiliates like partners. So the first sale actually goes 100% to the affiliate. And then any money that is sold on the back end, 40% of that goes to lifetime for that anything that lead purchases, which is really, really cool and really, really kind. And I was asking my friend, I was like, isn't blah, blah, blah like concerned about the operational costs and all that? He was like, no, he knows his numbers really, really well. And I was like, why aren't more people doing it? It's because they feel like they're giving up a lot, but you actually get a lot by giving out more, if that makes sense. It's kind of like this go-giver mentality. I was like, that's really interesting. Instead of fixating on the percentages, I think it's more important often to focus on growing the pie. So really, when you're working with someone, I would think about like, how can you exponentially grow the project beyond what you could do by yourself? Is this person adding tremendous value that I couldn't just contract out that's more in depth? So what I learned was it's not about keeping more, it's about growing more of the pie. Number 4, it's actually okay to work with friends and family. You'll hear these horror stories of like friends and family working together and they always say, it's such a freaking bad idea, right? My experience and through my friends like Joe and all them, they say that it's not a bad idea. And my opinion is like, hey, sometimes it's actually okay and it works out. So back in time when I was a young baby, my uncle actually opened up a bar in New Hampshire, which is like about an hour away from Boston. And so every weekend, my mom and dad, they would drop me off at my grandparents' house every single weekend just to help out, like taking care of me while my dad helped out his brother and my mom helped out too. There was one problem though. The problem was that he didn't pay my parents, and not only that, he freaking yelled at my parents too for not doing enough, right? Honestly, bro, you're getting free work. I mean, like, unless they're like stealing or something like that, beggars can't be choosers, right? Especially if you're not paying them. They didn't even pay for the gas. It was really crazy. And I think that was like the point that where my dad got really pissed. Him and my mom left. They never went back to a restaurant. The restaurant actually closed down. My dad disconnected from his brother, never talked to him again. He ended up passing away, actually, both of them. And that was their last interaction together. I was like, wow, that is crazy. All over freaking a business. But sometimes things get really heated and they die never speaking to each other again. Even though I've never like really had like that heated of an argument with my brother. I love my brother, by the way. I hope we never do, but who knows, you know, it can happen. But for me, like I've actually had very similar experiences with like friends. So I used to have a friend back in LA. She wanted help with her e-com business. She was doing product shots and all that. So I brought all my gear and started shooting for her, and she wanted free videos. And I was like, you know what? She was like, I'll give you a testimonial. I was like, I don't even do videography or anything like that, but I know my angles and some basic stuff. I was like, I'll help out just as a friend, right? It turned out to be actually very, very bad idea because this person, she not only like dictated a timeline, she was like really late on deliverables and all this sort of stuff too, where it was causing me so much headache. If you follow my timeline pretty well, like this person was pretty important to me. I gave a heads up. I was like, yo, dog, I'm going on this cruise with my family. Our family never gets together. I'm not gonna be editing videos on this freaking cruise. So anything that you need needs to be done like way before, and this is how much time I need. She was late on everything, and basically we ended the friendship right there. I mean, of course, at the time I was like really heartbroken. Actually, I was really disappointed because this person I would consider a very, very close friend. And I was like, how can you be this like demanding or selective just for free work? But there are people like that. You gotta be careful. There's a few lessons I learned. One, like usually the cheapest people usually ask for the most and demand the most. Most of the work that is free is usually a pain in the usually most of the time, right? I'm just forewarning you, not always, but a lot of the time. The more important lesson I learned from these two stories that are top of mind is for me is like money is actually a catalyst, a relationship catalyst. It's an amplifier. It kind of amplifies the nature of the relationship. First of all, if you are selfish as you'll notice that it will come out in the relationship. If your communication sucks, it will also come out in a partnership. I think the real question we have to ask ourselves sometimes is like, yo, am I ready to know the truth behind our real relationship? And I think 100%, like it's totally cool for the answer to be no. It does not have to be yes. You do not have to work with someone. You can keep someone at an arm's length, and sometimes it's better that way. But if you're not okay with that, that's totally cool. Which leads me to the other thing too. Okay, so maybe you try to do business with a friend and it doesn't work out. I think the truth is with partnerships, like sometimes good people do bad business. There's actually a quote from my really, really good friend recently, and it really resonated with me. Just because someone is a good person doesn't mean that they'll be a good business partner. And if a relationship does not work out, it's easy to demonize the other person as well. And I'm guilty of that. Like, so if it doesn't work out, it's easy to just blame the other person. Like, yo, that person is selfish as lazy, they were this, they were that, you know, and just like really tearing that person down when we forget they were actually a really good friend of ours to begin with before we got into this business stuff too, right? When I think about this, I want to tell a story actually. It's like about like a good person who did bad business, right? And so like I actually had a really good friend who found me through my YouTube channel. We partnered up to be his head of sales. And at first it was actually really great because he paid me a percentage of the retainer that I got years ago, and he kept on paying it, which was really sick. He did not have to honor that, but he did it. So that's his like good personality and stuff. I'm so grateful because yo, as I was kind of like doing this YouTube thing, I was like, yo, I really need like money and stuff like that. And he helped me out a long time ago. He didn't have to pay me an ongoing referral fee, but he did. And I think the cool thing was like we started closing deals together and everything went seemingly well. Like, you know, I was having a pretty high close rate. I wasn't as experienced as I am now with sales, but it was pretty cool. This was actually just a year or two ago. It wasn't that long. But then the twist, oh man, the dark ages. The leads actually started drying up a lot. And it was kind of funny because we're actually a paid media company. We used to like do Facebook ads, Google ads, all that sort of stuff. During this time when we weren't making as much revenue, I noticed that he started being more reactive. He started micromanaging a little bit more and always wanted to know the state of the deals, even though I documented everything in our CRM. I mean, I can really feel for him because like these are signs of cash flow problems. I felt his anxiousness because he was starting to worry because at the end of the day, you still have to make payroll. You still have to do all these things. And I mean, I would actually, as a friend, I would hit him up and be like, hey, you know, I noticed that, you know, like there's a change in your behavior and change of this. I noticed that like it just seems like something's up. What's on your mind these days with the business and all that, right? And I would talk to him about it. And he'd be cool for a few days, but then like over the next week, he would go back to his anxious self, micromanaging again. And it was kind of manageable. It was kind of annoying because one, we weren't making a ton of money and I was spending all my energy on this because I wanted to help a friend. But then the thing that really got me was like, you know, I brought in a referral from my personal network that I actually pay for just to meet people. And I brought this person in, but my friend, he actually went behind my back on a deal, was trying to follow up. And I was like, hey, listen, I got it. I told him so many times, like I got it. Like, honestly, if you ever work with me, you should just know that if you're my client, I got it. You don't have to freaking worry, right? And Ali would agree with me. All these other people would agree with me. I'm not perfect, obviously. Like sometimes I do forget stuff, but in this case, since we didn't have that many deals, I obviously knew the deal status because I was like, this is our only person in our pipeline, right? But he went back on my deal and he started hitting up this person from my personal network. And I was like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, do you not trust me? I'm like, it completely broke my trust because it's a good friend of mine. And I ended things shortly after. And also he didn't win the deal either because he was being way too pushy, right? It's like, oh my God. I'm not gonna lie to you. I wish I could say like I could apologize and like everything was happily ever after, but not gonna lie, I actually really looked at him very differently after that and was like, that was kind of messed up, dude. You know? And I honestly didn't want to talk to him after that. This is what I'm trying to get at. This is like all the inner work going into business sometimes, like being mindful of your state and stuff. Something I kind of realized on my mental health, like coaching sessions, is that I don't know how to forgive people. I'm a very spiteful dude. Like, it's funny. And I think like looking back too, it's like he wasn't a bad person. He was actually a really, really close friend. And he just made a bad business decision, you know? And I can empathize how he feels because it's not easy being a business owner. It's not easy hiring employees, having people on payroll and stuff. And maybe like at the time I was just like a bit too hard on him too, you know? But the truth is, like, I think like something we gotta remember is like good people can make bad decisions, especially when they're in a survival state, when they're fearful about their future and stuff, and when they're in states of stress. It happens to all of us. I'm not perfect too. I'm probably guilty of this too, man. And I think at the end of the day, it's really easy to demonize the other person, but I think some of the things that I could have done was really to have a more open conversation after we're done about it. I'll probably see him later, like in the future, not too far. He's in Asia and stuff, and I'd love to chop it up with him and just meet him in real life and all that, and just really kind of laugh about the situation because it was just so long far ago. Number 6, talk about breakups early. This kind of feels like a divorce or prenup conversation, like in relationships, but it is so important. Like, I think one of the things about like these conversations, it's like in relationships, it's like, oh, you don't love me? Like, I thought we were going to be together forever, right? You're planning on splitting up with me? And it's like, no, it's not the intent. And when business is the same thing, that's not the intention. And just talking about these things doesn't mean that we have the intent of doing this. It just means that we need a plan if things change, you know? And especially with like formal entities like this, it's very, very important to just be like, okay, who gets ownership of what? This is what we kind of do when we're not so invested, because like once we like, fall in love with the ABG or whatever, right? Like once that happens, then all emotional regulation goes out the door and we kind of forget like, oh, we can't really think with our brains. We're thinking with something else, right? Our heart. And I think sometimes like we forget things change, right? Like new opportunities come. You might have a kid. You might want to focus on family more. Maybe someone dies. You're just going through a lot of grief and you realize that you have a perspective change and you're just like, you know, what I wanted maybe a few months ago or the last few years isn't what I want in the future. That's why people sell their businesses, right? Life just happens at times. And I think it's pretty naive to believe that things will be the same thing forever. I mean, like, look at my life. 10 years ago, I was at the club all the time. I was like, you know, trying to rizz up girls and I wasn't very good at it. I was like, it was very, very different. My teenage years, dude, I was playing like video games all the time. I was playing Warcraft 2 and Counter-Strike, even though I wasn't good. I was doing all those things, Diablo, right? Like I was doing all those things. And now in my 30s, I shoot YouTube videos in my uncle's house on the freaking bedroom floor, and I do jujitsu and all that sort of stuff. So again, I was helping out a friend, a really, really close friend who's probably gonna watch this video, with his lead generation agency. And we weren't getting enough leads, and I was really calculating. I was like really forecasting. I was like, how much revenue can we actually make? And I was like, dude, I'm not gonna be making jack from any of these deals. This is really not worth it for me. And then at the same time, I was getting hit up with like different offers. Ali wasn't in the picture yet, but it's getting hit up with like the YouTube thing and all these other things. And I was like, honestly, this is taking so much bandwidth for me. I don't think I really want to do this anymore. And so we kind of broke up. And rather than having this whole fiasco, I gave him ownership of everything because that's what we agreed, that it's his agency, right? Even though I was like a partner, it's his agency at the end of the day. I think one of the reasons why we're like still good friends, I'm actually going to his birthday party pretty soon. We're still good friends because we had clear expectations. What if things don't work out? And it's totally cool. At the end of the day, I think in that situation, I realized that at least things, they weren't personal, and that's cool. It was just that like there wasn't enough revenue to justify the tension for the project, at least from my end. He's still working on the agency and actually is doing pretty well. Maybe it's doing better because I'm gone, you know? But like, I think about the worst thing too is like, what happens if we didn't have a plan? What happens if we had more stakes? What happens if it was more like a 50-50 partnership where it's like split down the middle and all that? And I was like, oh man, shoot. Then you'd be making decisions in an emotionally charged state, which is always really bad. And so I think it's really important to ask yourself, it's like, what happens to digital assets? What happens to physical assets for a business? All that stuff is really, really important. And if you don't know, ask ChatGPT. Ask ChatGPT, be like, hey, can you ask like 15 questions that I should consider if this business partnership does not work out, where we can like ask each other and just get clarity on this, right? I think this is where probably an attorney could be a lot better. And it goes again to this point of like, sometimes we attach so much of our identity to the actual like business when it's really not like that. It's kind of like you're a VC. You have some losing projects that don't work out. You have some winning projects that do work out, but then they might crash midway. Business breakup or partnership breakup feels like a relationship. Sometimes you can walk away just being friends, but my experience a lot of times it's awkward as in most cases, there's a weird feeling after. Yo, speaking about breakups, what causes the most amount of breakups? Well, we're gonna talk about it. This is another lesson I learned, number 7. Resentment is the killer for most business partnerships. So something that Chris Do, he is someone I look up to. He's much older than me. I don't know, he's like very playful in real life, but he's also like very serious at times. And then he's also like very direct sometimes too, which I love Chris for that. If you don't watch his content, I highly recommend that you do. But after this video, your boy needs more retention, not Chris Do. Yeah, something he always taught me was like resentment. I think like a lot of times when we're structuring deals, we think a lot about ourselves, and the goal of a partnership deal isn't always to get the best deal that's beneficial for us. It's really to structure a resentment-free relationship where in the long term, like it's actually a longer lasting relationship. And it's my philosophy not only for sales, but also for business. Because what I've realized, like things like resentment, things that go unsaid over, like they build over time. It's kind of like a pressure cooker and it becomes bigger and bigger. And especially if you're not big into inner work and stuff, you don't really notice that you're holding on this resentment. You might be like, oh my God, I actually don't like doing this work anymore. And then it turns into like, dude, I hate doing this. And then it's like, oh, I hate these meetings that we have. And I hate doing this. When no one really asked us to do those things, it's just like all these small things that kind of add up over time. And I think a lot of the times inner work helps us realize when we're feeling bitter, when we feel this resentment too. Even worse, if you don't do the inner work, if you are conflict avoidant, kind of like my natural nature is, you'll avoid talking about it. It's kind of like when your girlfriend is mad at you and you're like, hey, is there anything wrong? And she says no, but her body language is like this, and then she's clearly pissed off at you and you pretend nothing's wrong. It's kind of like that. You need to learn how to have conversations like this and be like, hey, seems like you're upset. Could be totally wrong, by the way, but what's on your mind? And if there's something wrong, they'll tell you. If there's something not wrong, they'll also tell you, right? And I think like a lot of times, the reason why we avoid this, or the reason why I have avoided it in the past, is like, I didn't want to have that conversation because I didn't want to deal with the realities of the truth of what was really going on, or realizing that I maybe wasn't perfect or I made a mistake. My ego didn't really like it. And I've been on both sides of this. I've done discounted rates at one point and made concessions that I wasn't happy with, but resentment built up over time. I've also been on the other side charging premium prices on things and watching the other party kind of like make their concessions, which later cause friction at the end of the day. If either party actually has resentment, it will build and the relationship will just like dissolve. This actually happened really recently, but like one of my really, really close friends, she asked me to partner up with her for a mastermind offer. What I did was like, okay, she wanted to work with me on a mastermind. I was very unapologetic about what I wanted, or more direct about what I wanted. I walked them through the framework I used for a partnership. So that Alan Weiss partnership earlier, I outlined all the responsibilities for this type of work, right? Like what needs to be done, right? Without assigning roles, and then the percentages based off the value of that. I used things like ChatGPT to help me, but also used a lot of my experience a lot of times too. And that's one of the good things about having someone is like, they can reduce that ignorance tax. More on that later. But I also outlined like what would happen if we broke up and disengaged and what I wanted out of those efforts. Like I definitely would want some sort of equity or cash flow or something, a percentage of it, if I'm going to put on all this work. Otherwise, I might just expand or scale my offers, right? Like I said, I was unapologetic about like wanting a certain percentage of the business if I walked away or if we broke up. We didn't fight about it at all, but my friend definitely disagreed. She was like, oh, I think this is worth blah, blah, blah. And that is okay. Like that is 100%. Everybody has their experience, different experiences. They can decide like what they want. But for me, I think having that clarity of like, this is the minimum that I will do something. I might hold some resentment toward this. This is what an agreement looks like with zero resentment up front like this, what I'm seeing. And that's the thing. You sometimes don't know like what you might feel resentful for later. Things grow, develop, things change, right? But the main thing I would say is like for resentment, the goal isn't to get the best deal or make the most money on your end. Like it's nice if that happens, but we want to think long term. We want to build a resentment-free relationship, because when something's resentment free, they're not going to break up with you. You won't have to deal with all the BS of like disruption and like ending something. And I think one of the things is by being very direct upfront about what you want, you won't have any surprises in the future. I told my friend, I was like, hey, I'm putting everything out on the table. Like, you are a friend. I respect you. This is kind of what I want. And I'd rather find out right now. If this doesn't work with you or you don't want to do this, it's totally cool. I'd rather have the disagreement now. I don't want there to be disagreement down the line. And like I said, even if we do agree on everything, it doesn't guarantee that there won't be resentment too. But we can do our best to mitigate as much as possible. And that's why we also have like some sort of check-in cadence where we check up on each other like maybe once a month, or some sort of cadence where we can just air things out rather than explode each other when we have a high pressure project going on. That's like the worst. Let's talk about something that I did during negotiation that I didn't tell you guys about. Number 8, always get a neutral party's opinion. I did leave one part out. Like, honestly, before I presented everything, I went to a close friend, business mentor of mine. His name is Mike Kim. He has a great book called You Are the Brand. He's kind of like my boomer Asian brother, and he always is so wise, gives me a lot of insights. But I go to him because he's really good at resolving these things. He's also like really good at kind of seeing things neutrally, because these parties, other than helping me, right, there's a slight bias there, but he has no dog in the fight. And I think like one of the worst things you can do is ignore the fact that we all have blind spots. We all have biases that we want the best for ourselves when it comes to business partnerships. It's just natural. It's just us how humans work. And so that's why I think it's so important to just get an outside perspective from someone completely neutral. And so in the past, a lot of times I used to skip this step because I didn't know anyone. No one wanted to know me because I had nothing to offer them. But things are different now. I have a lot of different business friends where I can lean on. I'm cool with a lot of people. And because of these relationships I kind of created, I'm able to leverage their ignorance tax, leverage their experiences, and leverage their mistakes so I don't have to make the same ones, even though most likely I probably will too, because I'm a slow learner. But I think a lot of times, like both me and my friends, we both have our own biases when it comes to looking out for our best interests. Kind of like a relationship coach or a counselor, right? Or a therapist. They're in the room listening to both of y'all. They'll bring up points. They're a neutral party and they can resolve emotionally charged things. And when it comes to business partnerships, these can be so emotionally demanding, especially if you make it about your identity, which it's really not about, honestly. Like I said, I think the thing that we got to remember is there will always be bias, but the worst thing we can do is just ignore it. Bias isn't a bad thing either. We just need to be aware about it. And what I've learned through doing this, honestly, is even if you don't take the advice of the neutral party, it can help you see the bigger picture. It can help you empathize with the other party, which is really, really important if you're trying to build a long-lasting, resentment-free relationship. Because usually the disagreement comes from what my experience is like people's experience. Like, for example, if someone says it's too expensive, what are they comparing it to? Probably something in their past, their experience of some sort. And at the end of the day, it's not about trying to be right. I think that's the worst thing you can do, honestly. But it's really just trying to see if there's alignment to work together. And if not, totally cool. It's better just to exit resentment free and not doing any of the work together. All right, number 9, don't force a partnership. So something I used to do a lot was try to do partnerships because I was really insecure about doing things alone. I didn't think I could make things work out or market well or do any of these things well enough by myself. I noticed myself taking certain contracts, certain roles, entering partnerships because I wanted validation from another party a lot of times too. If you've been following me for a while, you probably know that I used to have this investments course called Kick-Ass Investing. It was a pretty good course in my opinion, but it didn't sell like super well. It wasn't my main flag product and I got bored of doing content for it. But at the time, I didn't really know how to do paid ads. I didn't have a website. I didn't really know too much about email marketing and I wanted to save money. So one of my friends, he was a marketer, I partnered with him because I felt I needed the validation with him. He is a really good friend. But the truth is that partnership really strained our relationship as friends. So I partnered up with him because I felt weak in all these areas. I didn't feel like I could launch a info product by myself because it is a lot, like if you put in all this work to something, it doesn't work out. It really hurts your ego. It's like, oh, like there's all this sort of stuff, and it's because of that insecurity why I entered the partnership. But looking back, we didn't really have that synergy. Yes, he was good at like running paid ads. We never did paid ads, but like website stuff, tech stuff, he was good at all logistical stuff, but we didn't really have the synergy needed to really grow the business. I mean, he pretty much cared as much as any other contractor I would have hired. It's okay for a contract role, like when you're just hiring a mercenary, but it doesn't make a really, really good partner for a business. And because of that, he wasn't really vested in it. That's why my domain is down. I still have the website domain, but all the website on that thing was lost. But it wasn't his fault, it was mine because I chose that team to like grow that. And I decided to give him like 50% at a time. I did 50-50 back then. Bad idea, And in retrospect, I think it would have been a lot smarter or cleaner just to hire him as a contractor rather than force a partnership. It's really important to be honest with ourselves if we're thinking about a partnership. Like, what is this person doing to grow the pie? And am I doing this because I'm scared? Am I doing this out of insecurity? And if you are, that is 100% okay. That is normal. You don't need to beat yourself up over it. But I have to say, it's probably in that best case, it's best not to partner. It's probably good to do more inner work, right? But it's probably better just to hire a contractor or hire out that role for that project. So it's just really, really clean if a breakup does happen. By the way, I've been talking about all these breakups, but what if there was a way that we could prevent the breakup? What if there was a way that we could see the red flags? And so this is my favorite part, watching out for the red flags of a partner. So I think oftentimes it kind of goes with the earlier point I made, good people do bad business, but we go by character traits alone when assessing a partnership. And this I think is a big mistake at times. Just like my ex ABG girlfriend, I thought she was attractive. We did have some chemistry and stuff, our combos at the time, but there were some red flags that I kind of overlooked and I kind of regret. And now I'm faced with all this trauma resolving in my 30s, it's all good, but it definitely bit me. And so I think a lot of times it's a lot easier to identify the red flags. And I definitely realized this 1 year ago. I had someone that I met through PTYA, through Ali's part-time YouTuber Academy. And we met through the program we took. We spoke a few times. He wasn't a good friend. He was more of an acquaintance, but we always got along. And so he reached out to me because he told me he quit his job. And I was like, oh, dude, congratulations. And then he was like, oh yeah, I need help building a sales process, including sales page, high ticket sales, all this sort of stuff, offers and all that. I basically built the whole process for him, only for him to take my assets and terminate the contract. And I was so pissed. I wanted to go over his house and burn it down, which I didn't. I was thinking about it though, and he's in a different country, so it's cool. But at the end of the day, it was my fault because I ignored the red flags, looking for a really good partner. Just if I date a really bad girl, I mean, maybe people can do up things, but it's usually my fault because I chose that, And so I ignored the red flags, which I'm going to share with you right now. First one, he needed cash and was in a survival state. So one of the things that he kept on saying was oh, I have a daughter. I just quit my job. I really need this to work out. And I'm like, okay, there's a slight desperation here. I don't know if I feel good about this. Two, he wanted to do performance-based, but was also really stingy with the numbers. Remember that quote I told you about? All profit is derived from risk. I think it was shortly after, or maybe before I read the book Pricing Creativity. But you can't have it both ways. You can't pay very cheap and not take on more risk. It just does not work that way. Insurance companies don't work that way. Most things don't work that way. It's like if you want to do performance-based, there's inherently more risk that I need to take and offset that. But we basically came to performance-based, but he was very, very stingy about it. That's one thing I remember. That's based off my experience too. Like, what is stingy? I could go into that forever. Number 3, he was also like really reactive with his decisions and also felt like very impulsive. Like, so he would want, hey, let's do this one day, or let's do this another day, or I definitely like this person, I want to hire them. And then next day he would be like, oh, they're not that good, I want to fire them. He was like all over the place, and that's not the place for a good business partnership, honestly. I mean, it's fine to have ideas, but to be impulsive and act on them. Number 4, he often went against my advice, but blamed me when things went wrong. So for example, I told him, hey, don't hire this person. This person is a kid. He's like younger, sure, he's smart, but I don't think he has the experience. Like, he's showing all the signs of Dunning-Kruger effect where people think they know more than they actually do know. He's inexperienced. I tested him out. I don't think he's capable of doing the job. But what does he do? He hires a guy and then blames me for it not working out. And I'm like, dude, what the I'm so frustrated at him, but I'm also frustrated at myself. 5, he micromanaged a lot, especially in areas where he wasn't specialized in. Like, for me, I would put myself at a good, decent, like, purple belt for, like, business stuff. Maybe close to brown belt in terms of high-ticket sales stuff. But, like, he didn't not have any knowledge in this, and he was, like, micromanaging, changing things when I was working on things. I'm like, what the Like, who the does this? This isn't good, right? For a business partnership. Number 6, he wanted to meet constantly because everything was a freaking emergency, right? It was not. It'd be like, oh, we're not getting leads. I'm like, yo, how does this pertain to me? Like, I'm not in charge of this. It's like, okay, what do you want me to do about it? I'm like, what was your last CTA? I was doing a lot of this like behind the scenes coaching, which was really, really draining. And then 7, he wouldn't give the time to see his decision. So imagine making a decision, but not giving enough time to like vet itself out. So like literally I built everything. It wasn't working because of the people. I told him switch to people. He didn't switch to people, but he was like, oh, this whole system's not working, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, everything together was such a pain in the ass. A lot of it was like my fault, right? Because I didn't see the red flags. I jumped into bed too early, way too early, because I want to say I was helping a friend. But really, I think I really wanted validation at a time. I was like really sad, to be honest with you guys. Like things weren't going too well for me at this time. And because of that, I ended up helping an opportunist who was really just an acquaintance, took my work and all that. So him. But like looking back, I should have charged him full like rate and not a partnership. I think about like the regret was like I took all this risk for very little benefit. I wasted a lot of time and energy working with him only to leave with nothing. I think I made about $1,000 on this offer and it was starting to scale and he terminated everything and it fucking sucked. It's not completely lost because I actually created some really great templates. If you guys do go high level, I'll share with you guys later and stuff when I have all those built out. But yeah, it sucks. But anyways, I kind of realized later it wasn't all me, right? Like, because I took that same process and applied it to Ali Abdal and we like did 500K in deals in just a few like weeks or months of work, right? And I'm like, what the hell? Like, same process? Is it just me? Is it him? Maybe a little bit of both because I kind of matured after that. I think the main point is like, pay attention to the warning signs. Don't play Captain Save-A. And then what I realized, if we're playing this Captain Save-A, if you don't notice the pattern, a lot of times it's our inner child stuff, like our childhood stuff, where we want validation, we want to please others, and we become people pleasers. And it's important to be aware of these things too, like where it's coming from. Anyways, I hope this helps. My back is on fire right now because I'm sitting on this floor for about an hour. But I hope these lessons will save you from the heartache that I've experienced in business partnerships. Partnerships are one of those things that aren't easy to navigate, but like if you can kind of prepare ahead of time, set your boundaries and be aware of the potential red flags, you'll be in such better shape than I was. And by the way, if you are more experienced, let me know which ones did I miss in the comments. What are some lessons that you learned? I would love to hear your insights too. Stay compassionate, stay authentic, stay rebellious. Peace, mother people. Bye.